Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's been a minute. Last time I went live, I had Rohan on the stream. So I figured out, why don't I go live again and have Rohan on the stream again? What's up, my man?
Hey, I mean that's the perfect formula right now. Getting right back into it. Let's have some training camp talk. Coincidentally, that's where we saw each other for the first time last year out at training camp, and that's where we'll probably see each other just in about a week. So, glad to be on with you, and training camp is just around the corner.
Just around the corner. I'm going to drop a little quick intro and we'll get right to it. Niner fans, we're back. And just like Rohan said, the last time me and him actually started, the first time we started creating content and started talking and everything was last year during training camp. And training camp is next week for the veterans. They start on the 25th. Today, the rookies came into camp and they got to start and everything. They're learning the ins and outs. They get a little preparation time before the veterans come and kick their ass. So it's good. It's good, man, because football is just around the corner, man. I'm excited. I'm sure you're excited. So, real quick, Rohan, I know I'm going to training camp. Are you going to training camp this year?
I will actually be there all 9 days this year, which is good. Got everything settled out. Finally, figured out the ticket situation. I know a lot of 49er fans are, wilding out about that. Crazy. Fan base got a lot of love this year, but we'll be there all 9 days, so we'll be able to report and do what I did last year again this year for all 9 days.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. It'll be good. It's going to be fun to see all your content like you did last year. I'll be there too. Uh, Pretty much should be there all 9 days. I got all my tickets, but you're right, man. Ticketmaster, they couldn't handle the Niner gang, man. Those tickets, it was so like I had someone that I knew I was gonna get tickets, but I just like to get extra just in case. Just you never know. And man, those tickets, it was so hard to get tickets. The queue was going crazy, and then by the time you get past the queue, the tickets were out. It was a mess. Ticketmaster fiasco. They got to do better next year for the training camp tickets because the Niner fans want to go there. Make it a bigger venue. At the end of the day, they need to have all open practices at Levi Stadium next year. Make it a grand event. But
Yeah,
yeah,
man.
excited.
I mean,
I'm
that was
excited.
a it was a very interesting ticket release. Really, I was just wanting to get one for my brother, for him to accompany me one day, and yeah, waiting there. That was an interesting wait for sure.
It was. It was. So, welcome. Hey, you know what? Welcome back, everybody. I know I haven't been on live for long, so welcome to the chat. What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's been doing good. Having a good off season. Whatever you guys been doing, maybe taking a vacation, traveling, working, whatever you're doing. I hope everybody's doing well. But guess what? Football is here, and that brings us with what we got to talk about. So there hasn't been a lot, obviously, because training camp's just starting. The off season is ramping up. Players are kind of just making sure they're training, getting their bodies right for the start of camp next week. And like I said, rookies are there and they're getting ramped up before everything goes next week. So one of the sagas right now, before we get to anything really big, Rohan and I were talking behind the scenes. There's something going on with the running backs in the NFL. As we know, a lot of these guys have kind of held out, and they didn't really sign their contracts. Saquon Barkley, Richards from or Josh Jacobs from the Raiders, and then Tony Pollard. Right, they didn't get
Yeah,
signed. And CMC, he kind of went to bat for them. He goes, "It's crazy that none of these three guys are getting the money they want. Like all the running backs are backing them up." I don't know if you guys saw Brandon Ayuk yesterday, though. He posted on his Instagram story, and he said something like, "These running backs are talking like." He kind of like threw shade at the running backs, right? Like he threw shade at the running. I was like, "Oh damn!" Nobody posted it, but I saw it on his story. Like he was throwing shade at the running backs. He like, these running backs think they're somebody. The wide receivers hold themselves in highlight, like they're the divas of the NFL, and they know they get the big money making contracts. But then it goes back to with CMC, like they paid him a lot of money. They traded a lot for him last year at mid-season point for a running back, and the league doesn't really respect running backs. It seems like it's you get a guy, bring him through a couple years, you let him wear out his legs, and then when it comes time to pay him a contract, they're like, we'll go with the rookie. We'll save some bucks. So what do you think? Do you think CMC is worth what we gave up to get him? Do you think running back should be at higher value? Like what's your take on the whole situation?
There are two portions of it, right? The running back portion and the Christian McCaffrey portion. The way that I look at it, right, when we talk about the running back portion specifically, I mean, it's as unfortunate as it is, that's just the way the NFL is. The 49ers, the running back situation with the 40, I mean, not the 49ers, but in the NFL, running backs in general have short shelf lives. And I mean, the big really escalation to where we got today was the 2017 offseason where guys like Todd Gurley got a 6 year, $90 million contract and quickly flamed out due to injuries. Ezekiel Elliott got a 6 year, $90 million contract. He got cut midway through this deal. The Dallas Cowboys had to eat a lot of cap and really probably was there longer than expected when his production could no longer match what his contract was worth. And so you see some of these bigger deals and you think to yourself, wow, most of these bigger deals really they haven't panned out. And that's where the reluctance is to shell out a 4 year deal to a running back who already has 4 years of big time tread on them. In Saquon Barkley's case, it's 5 years with the likelihood of injury history. And I wrote an article about it earlier today, and here was kind of my takeaway for it. If you're a rebuilding team or a team not ready to contend yet for a Super Bowl, it's tough to really warrant shelling out big money to a running back, understanding that while they possess solid value for maybe the offense, they don't possess solid value in terms of overall capability. But if you're a team like the 49ers and you have the money to do so while also having a strong infrastructure able to contend, that's where it's okay. And that's really made with a cheap quarterback situation where the 49ers are probably paying their quarterbacks around 15 million total for three quarterbacks this year, whereas a lot of teams are paying a hell of a lot more for their quarterback situation, even if it's only as a middling quarterback situation as well. And so that's where I'm kind of like looking at it overall. And let me talk about Christian McCaffrey specifically because he holds a significant amount of value to this 49ers offense. I dubbed him the MVP of this offense last year, despite him playing in only 10 games, because he averaged over 100 all purpose yards a game. He averaged around 120, was a significant receiving threat alongside a solid rusher, on the ground. And really, it's just his ability to open up the entirety of the offense because defenses really gravitated toward McCaffrey freeing up open receivers. And also, it's a perfect check down option where you're guaranteed to get a few yards. And that made the job easier for quarterbacks, both Garoppolo and Brock Purdy, to go through progressions. And so the value he provides to this team mixed with combined with the Kyle Shanahan offense, I think warrants this deal, even though McCaffrey, has had an injury history in the past. And the other portion of it is the guaranteed money allotted in this deal. It was a 3 year, $36 million deal when San Francisco acquired him. Zero of that was guaranteed. Now, McCaffrey got some guaranteed money with the restructure, but the 49ers still have some flexibility with this deal and when they can move off of McCaffrey should they need to. Now, obviously, the hope is that you keep the tread on him a little lighter throughout the regular season over the next 3 years so that you can get the maximum amount of production for the majority of his prime. But I think McCaffrey is a unique case based on the fit and based on the way that he's utilized as well as his contract situation. Whereas some of these other players looking for bigger deals, I think that it's tough to warrant it when you have players that you can get good running backs in the undrafted portal. You can get good running backs in the draft with so many talented running backs consistently being pumped out in the draft that can come at such a cost-controlled price.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for the running backs. I feel for them. I mean, obviously, they're not going to be making these $15 million a year contracts. Nick Chubb maybe is the exception. Very few running backs are going to get that money. And there's a couple of things, like you said, you have a guy like CMC, and in 49er, Jeff made this comment that, running back, a lot of these running backs are not as versatile as a guy like CMC because he could catch out of the backfield, he could run, he could do a lot. He's a dual threat type running back, right? Like a Roger Craig type guy, Marshall Faulk. Like those are your dime a dozen type guys. A Debo, like he's a dual threat wide receiver, like the wide back. So not a lot of guys can do that, and not a lot of teams run a run heavy offense. Like running is important in the NFL, play action, all that stuff. But a lot of these teams they air it out. It's an offense. It's an air raid offense. Let's be honest. It's passing rules the league nowadays. And running backs, like you said, you can find a running back in the 6th round of a draft, undrafted, 7th round, and there's a lot of committees in most teams, right? Some teams they don't even have a star running back, like a running back one. They have 3 guys. You know, the 49ers, although they do have CMC, the star, they do still implement, a bevy of running backs, a committee, because they don't want to get the injuries. And what have we seen over the last couple of years? A lot of injuries, even though they had great running backs, right? You got Elijah Mitchell. And this year, too, just like you said, with all these other running backs there, they can lighten the load on CMC and get the most bang for their buck with what they're going to pay for him, and stretch out his years. Because, again, as we know, running backs get the most hits on the team. They take the first hits usually, and they take those weird helmets to the leg and those kind of unfortunate hits. So, having a lot of running backs is good for many teams. And then, let's say it's middle of the year, your guy that's running the bulk of the ball, he gets dragged down with a hamstring injury. Some guy that was a 6th-round pick, all of a sudden, is a star of your running back committee now. And it just doesn't help you justify paying these guys a lot of money. It's unfortunate. I get it. I'm glad that they're all rallying together. Maybe they should get a union, but it is unfortunate. The running back's not valued as it once was 10, 20, 50, 25 years ago. It's just the game, man. I think Zeke Elliott probably ruined it for everybody with his big contract. But speaking of contracts, I want to use this as a perfect segue to a guy that should be getting an extension. We've talked about him a couple times. He's the top rusher rating-wise on Madden. He was the reigning defensive player of the year. He's former rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year. You might know him, Rohan. His name is Nick Bosa.
Never heard of him. Never heard of him.
You never heard of him? Well, he's a star on the 49ers. Now that you cover the 49ers, you might want to get to know him. This guy is a world-class athlete. The guy's got muscles on top of his muscles. Nick Bosa contract. What is your prediction? When do you think they're going to sign the dotted line? I think it's going to be Monday, the day before players meet training. The veterans come down to training camp. I think it's going to be Monday. We're going to have a hell of a day. And then Tuesdays, they're going to show all the content of Nick Bosa and signing the contract because he's in the building. I think it's going to be Monday.
I think I'll go a little later. I think it's going to be week 2 of training camp. Probably the beginning of August. And I don't think it's anything because of bad blood necessarily, but more so in the case of Nick Bosa, there's not necessarily a reason for him to be on the field. Like, it's not that there's not a reason for him to be on the field, but the 49ers aren't necessarily harmed with him off the field to begin training camp because they anyway will ease him in. They don't play him as much. He might not play some days in team drills to ease him in. And you also know that Bosa has been working significantly in the offseason, making sure he stays in shape, continuing to perfect his craft. So I don't think that there's that big of a worry. I put him more so on the Deebo Samuel kind of trajectory, kind of signs that second week of training camp, but also can be implemented a little bit as it goes. With that said, I know it gives a little bit of room for other 49ers to kind of shine with Bosa off the field because you don't really know who are going to be those 4 starting defensive linemen without Bosa. Drake Jackson inevitably be one who's going to be kind of the opposite guy. I think that's where we're going to look for. Don't think that there's going to be any issues necessarily, but I think it might take a little bit longer potentially through the second week of camp.
Yeah, that's a little nerve-wracking to me, Ron. I'm not gonna lie to you. If he holds it out even though I know he's gonna get paid, I just want it to get done so camp can start and we're all happy. We're all singing Kumbaya. We see Nick Bosa and Trent Williams that first week. I mean, because that's always a great sight, at training camp, and just to kind of have a sigh of relief because you know how it gets. Niner fans get a little antsy, especially if someone holds out. We saw the whole Deebo situation, and obviously, I don't think there's any bad blood. I think it's just a matter of getting the guaranteed money, But I do hope it's sooner rather than later. I will tell you this: that next week, if he doesn't sign, I'm going to be holding my breath a little bit while we're at training camp, and I don't like to hold my breath. So hopefully he signs Monday, but I could see how you're saying it might, they don't necessarily need him there that first week. But I just hope that everything gets done before, because then the speculation mounts and then teams are going to, he's supposed to get his, how it goes. So I don't think there's any issues. I know they're going to do everything they need to get him signed, but I just hope it's sooner rather than later.
I mean, I agree too. Sooner Nick Bosa gets on the field, sooner the 49ers are continue to be the 49ers. That's how I look at it.
He's the guy, man. There's so many good and Hargrave. I'm so excited to see Hargrave next week. Oh my God, I'm super excited to see Javon Hargrave finally on a 49er jersey next week for the first time. Oh man, I'm that guy. It just gives me chills knowing that he's going to be on the same defensive line as Nick Bosa, man. Whew.
Yeah. And I mean, I like S Flood's comment. Bosa versus Trent, always the best matchup at camp. We don't get too much of it, right? Both players are in and out in terms of playing a lot with the first team, but when they're on the field, I mean, that's a rarity. You don't see one of the best left tackles always go against one of the best defensive ends. Potentially even the best at their positions, and so that would be some good content. That's something that I look forward to seeing at least once this camp.
Yeah, I hope they match up a little bit more than they have in the past. Because you're right, you don't always get to see that, but every now and again you see it. Like, oh man, it's like a couple years back when Joe Staley was on the team and Nick was a rookie. That was like the battle. It was like, oh my god, and Nick and he knocks him back, and Staley's telling the story of how, oh man, this guy was just so ahead of his time as a rookie. So it's always fun to see those camp battles with those, the stars of the team. I'm looking forward to like Mooney Ward, Brandon Ayuk. Like last year, you were there. Those two went. It was just when those two guys were going at it. It was like, oh my god, like iron sharpens iron. It was two warriors going above each other. It was like DBZ. You had Goku and Vegeta. It's like they're cyan mode. Nobody else on the field mattered, and they were going at each other. I'm excited for the star
One
match.
more. I've got Ayuk and Fred, man. Are we gonna see some more fights?
Yeah.
Kind of like
Oh
that.
yeah,
Like
that was great.
I kind of like that.
Yeah. Oh my God. So let's get into obviously the big story this offseason. Well, every offseason for the 49ers. We talked about this behind scenes before we started. Quarterback. Where is the state of the quarterback, Rohan, going into training camp? Like obviously Trey Lance has worked his tail off this offseason. He's been training, in TCU. He was there this weekend with the Patrick Mahomes' quarterback coach, as he's been all offseason training with him. Brock Purdy off site in Jacksonville, rehabbing, throwing, and stuff like that. And of course, there's Sam Darnold. What do you see going on in this training camp? Like, obviously, we don't know how far along Brock is. We don't know if he's going to be throwing with the team drills and stuff, or if he's going to be in the back getting the Jimmy Garoppolo treatment, in the backfield, throwing, doing his rehab. Like, he may be doing that. But I think all eyes are going to be on Trey Lance. He's the biggest question coming into training camp. This is kind of make or break for him. What's your mindset going into this training camp about the quarterbacks of the 49ers right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of going into it with an open mind right now. Signs seem to be pointing, trending upwards for Trey Lance. A lot of teammates coming out in his support. His quarterback coach saying he looks like a different quarterback. I mean, that's the big thing. I mean, it seems like he's continued to improve, and there was some improvement ahead when he was in the offseason, ahead of minicamp and OTAs. Seems like some more improvement now. So you'll see a little bit. I'd expect another back and forth between Lance and Darnold in terms of rep count. One gets the one day, the other gets the 1 reps the other day, and something like that. I think Purdy is the biggest wild card. I mean, the one question that I have, will the 49ers just end the speculation and place him on the PUP list and essentially rule him out for the entirety of training camp? Because when we heard earlier, right, some of those tentative dates being thrown out there was August 21st, which is between preseason game 2 and game 3. Obviously, the 49ers have held out hope that he could potentially be there for the start of training camp, but I'm not exactly sure if that's going to be the case. And, that would obviously be a something to monitor for sure. Or do the 49ers kind of let it slide and see if they can get Purdy out there during some day in training camp, or how do they kind of do it?
Yeah, that's actually a really good, idea and good kind of, area to have your mind at with Brock Purdy, because you're right. We don't know where he's going to be. We don't know how far along in his rehab process is, and maybe they will put him on the PUP list, because that can kind of give him that ability if he's ready and ready to kind of get in there and play. They can actively put him back in the roster, and you're really not going to lose any impact on your roster. You can let him go out there, work, be on the side field, do everything you need to do. Just won't have to be on team drills, and then eventually when he's ready to be eased in, drop him in when he's ready. So I think that's probably best case scenario. That actually might be what happens. I'm sure that next week we'll get all the answers, right? If we see that update, from Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter, boom, Brock Purdy's been placed on the PUP, I think a lot of people initially be like, oh my God. But I think knowing that he can eventually be augmented back into the roster once he's kind of ready, then I think we'll all be kind of like relaxed. Because again, the goal is for him to be ready by week 1. It doesn't mean he needs to be there in training camp and doing all the drills, because they know what he has, what it takes to be the starting quarterback. Like, they've already backed him, said he's the quarterback as long as he's healthy. Now the goal is to get him healthy and make sure he goes through his rehab. So that probably is what's going to happen. I'm guessing maybe Adam Schefter might be dropping that bomb next week. We'll see. And if it happens, Rohan had it first. Give him his credit. He's the one. He had the idea. He knows better than anybody, man. This guy's all the ideas. You should just be the coach of the team, Rohan.
Completely off topic right now. Just saw an article published by my own 49ers web zone. Javon Hargrave, 84 rating in Madden, was also considered a top 10 defensive tackle by NFL execs and NFL personnel. 84 overall is the number 17 ranking amongst defensive linemen. What do we think, guys? Is the top 10 rating a little more realistic, or is the number 17 ranking by Madden a little more realistic for where Javon Hargrave ranks amongst defensive tackles in the NFL?
Man, I think he's top 10. Obviously, he was one of the better defensive linemen in the whole NFL last year. He had double-digit sacks from the interior line position. Niners paid top dollar. And he did comment on that. He says, "Oh, we'll be editing this or something during the season." So, he's probably like, okay. I don't know. I think it's biased. I think if he would have stayed in Philly, his numbers would have been a little bit higher on Madden. That's just my personal opinion. Again, Madden rankings, to me, it's a video game. I could care less about Madden rankings. I think that the executive rankings and the player rankings and those types of things matter a little bit more to me. So if the players, if the executives, if analysis, people that are doing analysis and those types of guys are rating him and he's in top 10, that means more to me than a video game ranking. That's just me.
Yeah. I mean, I feel you, and I mean, I don't think it's gonna bother them that much, but interesting to see, especially because I just saw 49ers Javon Hargrave be ranked, I think it was number 6 defensive tackle in the NFL, and coming down all the way to 17.
Yeah, I agree. And this is a good comment from Flood. He says Hargrave is an upgraded version of DJ Jones, and we all know the impact of DJ on the Niners. And yeah, this is the type of impact I think that Hargrave's going to have, even bigger than DJ Jones. Him and Armstead are just going to open up so many lanes. They're going to just terrorize centers and interior linemen. It's just going to make Nick Bosa's day so much easier, and that's what we need, because last year, what was it? In the playoffs, we kept saying, we're like, Bosa looks tired. He needs help. And they got it for him, and that's Javon Hargrave. This is Nick Bosa's help. And then we
100%.
just got to pray that Drake Jackson or Clelin Ferrell on the other side can be the guys that we need, and replace Omenihu and Samson Ebukam. I mean, it's not a small feat. I know people scoff at their numbers. They didn't get a lot of sacks, but that's a lot of snaps to replace. They played a lot of snaps for this team. So that, to me, is the biggest story for the defensive line, because Drake played maybe 11 games last year, and Clelin Ferrell, he never really lived up to his billing as a top 5 pick. But you know how our D-line coach is, so we'll see how it goes. Chris Kasurk's a man. Maybe he can get the most out of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, talk about Hargrave. I'd say he's an upgrade for sure over DJ Jones. As for the version, we'll see, because Hargrave is more of a pass rusher. DJ Jones never really untapped that part of his potential. Obviously, one of the best run defenders, though, in the NFL, with the explosiveness and athleticism that he possesses. We'll be interested to see how much Hargrave plays. Do the 49ers look to keep him healthy, or do they look to make him a 3-down guy? Do they look to keep him healthy? Because he's not as good of a run defender as you'd expect, but he's a very prominent pass rusher, and he can still hold his own in the run game. 49ers do, though, have guys like Kevin Givens, who's more of a pass rusher, Kalia Davis, even Javon Kinlaw, who reportedly is healthy the entire offseason for the first time ever, and doctors have said he looks a lot different medically, that is. And so that's something to keep an eye on. The point, though, being they have depth. Are they going to use it and continue to operate the way that they have before, or are they going to try and implement these 3-down players like Javon Hargrave and maybe give up a little more in the run game to keep your best players on the field overall?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we got to keep our best players healthy. And you're right. It's going to be a strategy of how they implement these guys, because you want to keep your best players healthy for the playoffs. And you're right. He may not be the best run defender compared to where DJ Jones. DJ Jones was a phenomenal run stuffer. A little bit different game, but this guy's a great pass rusher. So you're right. They do have a lot of depth. Kalia Davis is a guy I'm intrigued to see. Rookie last year, basically redshirted. And I like some of those other guys. Javon Kinlaw, I'm not going to hold my breath on him, but if he could come in and give us some snaps and be productive, I'll take what I can get. If he stays healthy and gives us production, that's icing on the cake. So we'll see. But I am very excited about Hargrave. Moving on, good question from Paul. He says, do you guys know anything about the Luther injury? I know you basically were one of the first people to kind of report on this on WebZone. He's on the PUP list. There's no really specifics that I've seen, but maybe you have some insight on the injury there, Rohan.
No, I mean, I haven't heard anything necessarily on the Luther injury at the moment. I'm assuming, though, as training camp comes, Kyle Shanahan will speak with the media soon, and that'll be clarified there. It seems like it was an injury sustained between minicamp and between OTAs, because I don't think it was an injury prior, because he would have been placed on the NFI list if it was prior to him being drafted. He was also present at OTAs and minicamp. Maybe it happened at the end of that portion, but it seems like it could have happened recently. But PUP list, I wouldn't be too worried necessarily in that you can be activated anytime prior to training camp, but it's somewhat of an indication that an injury does exist and that he might miss a little bit of time at the moment, and they want to keep a roster spot open.
Okay, so if they have to bring someone in, they can, correct?
Essentially, yes, they can now.
Very good, very good. Well, maybe they just wanted to put him on so they can go sign Yannick Ngakoue next week. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Probably not, but we'll see how it goes. Real quick, Flood says, can we have an educated discussion about the right tackle position? What say you about Colton McKivitz? I don't know if I've asked you this question, but as time goes on, I'm not worried about Colton McKivitz. I think he's going to be a solid starter. I think he's going to hold it down. Just the biggest thing for me is I just hope that the starters stay healthy because I think we have a pretty formidable offensive line.
I honestly don't know what to expect when it comes to Colton McKivitz, right? I've seen him before. Haven't necessarily been as impressed as some other people with the way that he's played. But overall, I think that, the 49ers had a plan. And I mean, I'm at least curious to see how he performs, understanding that Colton McKivitz, he's a guy who has really done most of its work behind the scenes. I'm interested to see how does he perform now. But saw him last year, wasn't as impressed with him last year, but he's gotten a couple of years now of development and now has a solidified spot rather than being a swing tackle guy. And so I'm interested to see how it is. My biggest discussion, though, when it comes to right tackle isn't even with the starter. It's with the backup, because I don't think there's a single backup right now I feel confident with at tackle for the 49ers, be it left or right tackle. You've got guys like Jalen Moore, Matt Pryor, even Leroy Watson. I'm not confident with any of those three options. And what I said recently is we know Trent Williams is bound to miss maybe 3 to 4 games, a year, just with the way that with rest, with health and things like that. Who's going to play that spot duty now? Because they trusted McKivitz before and he was solid, but they don't have that option anymore. And Brunskill, he's gone. Who do they trust? Do they go out and try and get another guy? Because right now, I'm not that confident in the options that they currently have. That's my biggest question, maybe even with the entire roster. Who can be a backup offensive tackle on this team? Do they try out Burford there? That's an idea Marco and I have floated. Do they try out, do they even try out Nick Zakelj out there? We'll see, but not too confident in the current options at the moment.
Yeah, that's why I said I'm okay with the starters. I think that I don't have any problem with McKivitz. I think, and like you said, he wasn't great the last few years, but again, he was developing. He didn't get a lot of snaps and reps. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, he's replacing a guy that most of the Niner fans, he lives in infamy, Mike McGlinchey. Like, people desecrated. Like, this guy, you mentioned Mike McGlinchey to about 90% of the fan base on 49ers Twitter, they'll burn him. They'll put his name and just blast him, right? So if this guy can be a solid pass rusher, I think we'll be okay, because that's what Mike McGlinchey was bad at, is pass protecting. Now, he was a good run blocker, so Colton McKivitz will have to learn, the schemes and be able to execute, because run blocking is huge in this system. But I think he can stand up and block well. But again, you're right. The starters, I'm fine with. Trent Williams, he may miss a few games. He's getting older, and you want to kind of have that load management to make sure he's healthy for the playoffs. Banks and Burford, they're solid. Will they be able to improve upon their first years last year? And Brendel, he surprised me last year. That's why I think as far as starters, I'm not too worried because I was one of those guys that was like, oh my God, Jake Brendel's going to be starter. And he proved me wrong. And he went up the development path with the 49ers. So I have some faith with McKivitz, but you're absolutely right, Rohan. You hit the nail on the head. I'm a little worried about the backups because I don't have any faith in these guys. Jalen Moore, I don't even think he's going to make the final roster. He might just because they don't have a lot of depth on the backup lines, right? And then there are a lot of rookies, Nick Zakel, we don't know what he's capable of. Jason Poe, like they sound great. They have a lot of hype. We haven't seen him play. And then, Matt Pryor, he kind of had a bad year with the Colts last year. I don't really feel too confident about him. And Leroy Watkins, or Watson. And then the other guy to me is like a wild card is Feliciano. Like he's been a starter, but can he play right tackle? Can he play? Is he better at guard? But if we got Burford and Banks, like does he even have a spot? Is he more the Swiss Army knife guy? So you're right. The secondary line, if there's any injuries, a lot of questions. So I pray that this starting offensive line doesn't have any injuries because there's a lot of question marks behind them. But we'll see how they look in training camp because, that to me is the biggest question. If the offensive line sustains any injuries, will we be able to have a good enough offensive line to keep the quarterback healthy? Because what has been the issue over the last couple of years, offensive line goes down, gets hurt, leads to an injury on the quarterback, and then the whole situation spirals out of control. And look at Philly. We couldn't beat them. We couldn't penetrate them because the offensive line was just too stout. So we have to have a solid offensive line.
No, I agree. You got to have a solid offensive line. And overall, when you talk about the offensive line as well, I mean, last year was good. And last year I predicted it was good. I said before the after training camp, based on what I saw, I didn't think that there was going to be issues like a lot of people thought. A lot of people said this offensive line might be one of the shakiest position groups of the team. I didn't think so. I thought if Mike McGlinchey was going to be ready week one because there were questions surrounding that torn quadricep injury, I thought this team was going to be a top 15 unit, maybe even top 10. And they even beat my expectations because they were well within they were probably in that top 10 range, somewhere in that back end of the top 10 when it comes to offensive line. I'll look again this year. We'll see how it is. But I'm not worried about the interior. I think there's strong depth. John Feliciano is one of them. You've got guys like Jason Poe, Nick Zakel there. You've got options on the interior, even with the departure of Daniel Brunskill. Really, though, more worried about the outside and the depth there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We'll see what happens, but I think I have the same concerns as you. And like you said, last year, I mean, that offensive line definitely outplayed what I thought they were capable of. So shout out to them. They know the talent. The team knows the talent. The coaches know it. And they usually get the most out of these players. At the end of the day, they usually do a pretty good job of developing these players. So we'll see. I'm excited. But yeah, that's definitely going to be one of the big question marks coming into training camp as expected. That's always a big question for the 49ers. Offensive line, we have to be able to protect the quarterback. As I said, that's one of the issues that we've had over the last couple of years. So we'll see what happens. There's one position, though, that if we have a really crazy strength, that there's going to be players that may not make the roster that could make the roster that be left out. It's wide receiver because you have two of the best wide receivers in the league right now. Debo and Brandon Ayuk. Debo coming off a down year, but he looks just poised to go crazy. Like you can see the whole offseason. He said last year was ridiculous. He's sorry, apologized for coming into camp shape, and he had the contract situation, but he just looks determined this year to go back to that 2021 season. And Brandon Ayuk obviously locked in a contract year. Like those two guys look like they're both going to be 1,000-yard receivers or all-purpose 1,000 yards. But even behind them, there's some solid weapons. I think that's going to be a hard position to crack. But what do you take on? What's your take on the wide receiver spot? I think Debo and Ayuk might be they could make a case for the top wide receiver duo in the NFL. They're going to have some fun this year.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that they could be a very, very good wide receiver duo, especially because you've got two guys that are motivated for different reasons. Brandon Ayuk, fresh off 1,000-yard season, he's a strong candidate to repeat his performance from a season ago, especially when you consider the fact that this is essentially a contract year for him. Next year, he's going to be eligible for an extension, and I think the 49ers make their decision on him next year. It's do they keep him, which I would lean to right now, meaning they're going to have to pay him, or do they move on from him and maximize off his trade value, which means, it's dependent on what he does this year. And so for me, I think Ayuk is motivated because this year, essentially, dictates what contract he's going to get for his second deal. As for Deebo Samuel, this year could dictate what his future in San Francisco holds because he's coming off a down year. He's really had one super strong year and been battling injuries or been battling inconsistencies elsewhere. Next year, you can't put up 600 receiving yards. It can't be 632. You've got to get closer to that 1,000 range, if over that 1,000 range, especially 1,000 all-purpose yards. And so I think he's motivated. I mean, he looks he's taken accountability. He looks the part a little more. He normally comes into training camp out of shape. Seems like he came into mini camp this year in shape, and it seems like he's on that path again. And I think that especially if he can maintain his health, it should be a strong year for him as well. And when you have both of those options playing at their highest level, it's a good sign for the 49ers because it only opens up the playbook and it provides you a lot of opportunity there with both players.
Yeah, I agree. If those two guys are playing at a high level and they're both money motivated, basically chasing that bat, I mean, it's going to be scary offense because you got, again, Brandon Aiyuk contract season. And if we're being honest, this is a contract year for Deebo because you're right. He's playing for his future with not just the team, for the NFL. If he has another inconsistencies and injuries, teams are going to look at him and say, he was good a couple years ago, but he can't stay healthy, and he's not going to get big contracts that he wants. And he likes his money, so I think Deebo is ready to come in and just be Deebo again. Like you said, he's coming into camp this year in fantastic shape compared to where he was last year. Again, he had the contract situation, so it's a little bit of a that was a weird situation last year, but he took accountability, like you said. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited to see who's the wide receivers behind him. Jauan Jennings also in a contract year. You got Danny Gray coming off of, a rookie season that was a little bit. It was not a little bit. It was very disappointing, with all the hype that they had on him. We'll see if he can step up and be that physical guy that Shanahan wants. And you got Ronnie Bell. There's a lot of guys. Ray McLeod. Wide receiver is pretty deep position on the 49ers, and there's going to be some really good players that don't make the final roster. I think they keep 5. They could make 6, but it's going to be hard to crack the 53-man roster overall. And to me, wide receiver is going to be one of the most entertaining battles in training camp. I really think so.
No, I agree. I do agree. And the way that I look at the wide receiver position is probably a little different than others. I know a lot of people want to see Danny Gray on the field. However, I urge to air caution again for the 2024 season. When you draft these players, when the 49ers are looking to draft these players, it's not only for the year ahead, it's just for the future ahead. San Francisco understood. You've got Ray McLeod, who they signed on a 2-year deal last year. Mm-hmm. You probably don't bring him back if he plays how you expect. He probably prices himself out of your range. And they also had Jauan Jennings, a guy who has outplayed his contract significantly because he was a 7th-round pick. He makes $825,000, $900,000 a year. He's dirt cheap. He doesn't even count to the 49ers 53-man roster right now. Or sorry, not count towards the salary cap right now because he's not one of the top 51 players that is being paid. And so, when you talk about it like that, 49ers are taking advantage of their investments. But Danny Gray, I view him more of a 2025 guy. I think he takes another year of seasoning, plays as a backup. Obviously, if injuries occur, he'll be thrusted into the lineup. But I think he's more of a 2025 guy where next year, with another full season of not only reps on the field, but also getting stronger and being able to play as that slot guy, I think that he could fit in well and also could see more opportunity on the outside, understanding that the 49ers may have to make a difficult decision between Brandon Aiyuk or Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, that's a good call on that, actually. I didn't think about it that way, but you're right. The 49ers are always developing for the future. They're always looking not just 10 steps ahead, but maybe 100 steps ahead. So you're right, because they do have Jennings, and if he has the season that I think Jennings is going to have, he's not going to stay next year. He's going to be priced out, unfortunately, because you're right. You got to keep Brandon Aiyuk next year. If you pay him a lot of money, and then Deebo's going to want some money, can you pay Jauan Jennings a bigger contract that he probably deserves? And he can get his money somewhere else and be a bigger weapon, a wide receiver 2 somewhere, or a bigger, component of someone's offense. And it'll be great to see him get money becoming a 7th-round pick to a higher paid player, a solid depth player for another team. Just like a lot of the players on the 49ers. DJ Jones, late round pick, became very highly paid in Denver. And then Emmanuel Mosley, we couldn't afford him. So, unfortunately the injuries, but he got paid more than we probably were going to pay coming off the torn ACL. So these guys play so good. and other teams value that, and we're just like, okay, we got players for the future. So it's a good point. I didn't see it that way, but I do like that point. And again, one thing about Danny Gray is he can continue to build his strength, and if there's an injury, he can make the most of his opportunity and really, make Shanahan think twice. Say, oh, okay, I really like what you did when you gave us when you had your opportunity. So we'll see. Yeah, no, I think that's definitely one way to look at it. I like that. I'm gonna shift gears. There was a comment up there. Someone says they saw Marcelino McCurry ball in Target, and he just looked jacked. The last time I saw him too, he looked friggin' monstrous. I saw him at the what was it? The baseball.
Oh, there was a charity softball game or
charity
something like that, right?
event. Guy was. I was like, oh my god, and that was like 2 months ago. So I can only imagine him have gotten even more jacked in 2 months. So and the comment says that they think he's going to be linebacker 3. I do too. I think Marceline McCurry Ball, he's kind of the odds-on favorite to be the guy that replaces Azeez Al-Shaair. But I don't know. What's your take? Do you think it's Marcelino or bust, or some of those other linebackers got a chance to take that spot?
I think that Marceline McCurry Ball, he's a guy who I was high on since the 49ers signed him last April as an undrafted free agent. Guy who, I've rode the wave on for a while, and I'm happy that he's in the conversation this year. We saw him reach the podium at this year at minicamp. He does look yoked. He's looking pretty big, and that's important because remember, this isn't a guy who isn't a linebacker. He's a safety converted linebacker in college. He played safety at times. He was around 215 in college. So now he's looking big, but he maintains that strong, that good speed, that sideline to sideline speed, and also downhill ability. I think all of that is important. And I think that there's a lot of players who are going to have an equal shot at that LB3 spot. Oren Burks, I would say, is the leader. I know a lot of people don't count him as much, but he's the leader right now in the clubhouse, understanding that when the 49ers played in that without Azeez Al-Shaair last year, he was that guy who slot in to that third linebacker spot, that sub package. But you're going to carry 4 to 5 linebackers, likely 5. And McCurry Ball is competing with the 2 rookies in D. Winters and Jalen Graham, both of whom have different skill sets. Winters is more of that, he's a speedier option, a little smaller, undersized, but the 49ers like undersized linebackers. That's one of their trends. They like the undersized guys who can play better sideline to sideline, fit better in their system. Graham isn't undersized, but he also isn't as slow as his 40 time may indicate with that 4.6 speed, which isn't also bad for a linebacker. Moves fairly well sideline to sideline as well, and he's another guy who could fit in the mold. And then you've also got Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, who's a special teamer. So a lot of options here. I think that 49ers have a good amount of options. Query Ball firmly in the mix to make a roster this year after barely missing out last year.
Yeah, 100%. He was undrafted, and he kind of worked his way through the team last year, but they re-signed him. Definitely think that he has a chance. Yeah, I agree with you, though. Oren Burks probably has a leg up on him. He's a veteran special teams guy, so he knows the system a little bit more, bit on the team, and he's friends with George Kittle, so that kind of gives you a little leg up on the competition. But yeah, Marcelino McCurry Ball, if he can continue the trajectory that he had and build off from his great preseason. His preseason last year was phenomenal. He was all over the place. So if he can continue to be that fast sideline to sideline linebacker, definitely has a chance. But I think that's going to be another fun position to keep an eye on. Linebackers for the 49ers, they're always so robust, man. They just do such a good job of finding linebacker talent. And they're, linebacker coach and everybody is just from top to bottom. It's fun to see how they develop, but I'm excited to see what Steve Wilks does in that department too. D'Amico, former linebacker, so I think he was really able to help these linebackers flourish. So we'll see the difference with Steve Wilks there. I'm excited to see how his defense, brings it this year with all these, phenomenal players, Hufanga and Bosa and Warner and Greenlaw, and et cetera, et cetera. So going to see how it goes. 49er Ben says, Larry Krueger said Jauan Jennings may not make the team. And then he says that Larry says a lot of outlandish things. I'm going to be live with Larry again. We didn't get to do our Monday show, but we're going to be live tomorrow. I'm going to ask him this. I'm going to say, do you really think Jauan Jennings doesn't make the roster? And then I think someone else commented. Paul says that Tay Martin or Ronnie Bell might make the roster. And if they show out, and they could trade Jennings if one of those guys stands out. Do you think they could trade Jennings this year? Maybe in the offseason real quick before season starts? What do you think? Is that even a viable option? What do you think?
Now, I'll say this. I think I see where Larry's coming from, but I don't buy the argument that Jawan Jennings can get traded. I remember last year Larry was high on Tate Martin, just as I was. He was one of my favorite undrafted free agent signings and a guy who I really thought was shining out in training camp. Tate Martin's the only guy who I believe can replace Jawan Jennings on this team. Why? Because he's the only guy that is that 6'3", 185, 200, 185-pound guy. But nobody on the 49ers really can replicate Jennings' run blocking prowess. And I view the 49ers position groups, skill position groups the same. Running backs, tight ends, wide receivers. The way you get on the field, not the way you separate yourself, but the way you get on the field first is through blocking. Same goes with tight ends, same goes with wide receivers. That's how you get on the field. Then it's your extra ability that really that causes you to stand out. That's the way it is, especially for role players when it comes to the 49ers. And so to me, Jennings just provides that value and that extra physicality. I don't think the 49ers will let him go unless they get a significant package, which I don't expect. I also think that if your goal is to compete, Jennings on that contract is an extreme value play, and I think that that's something you have to take advantage of. Understanding that some of these receivers you could pass through waivers and end up getting. Tay Martin, he's a guy who I really like, and if the 49ers carry six, he would be my favorite, not Ronnie Bell, to make the 53-man roster. But I honestly think the 49ers go back and carry five again and look to replenish this wide receiver group next year, adding Tay Martin in the fold next year alongside Danny Gray for a bigger role and create a different group next year in the absence of Jennings and maybe even Ray McLeod, because Martin, that same frame, he could be the guy. I don't think Ronnie Bell makes the 53. I know a lot of people have seen him flash, but I think that Tay Martin just provides a better. He provides something a little more unique for the roster. In his frame, and I think that might be a little more wanted for the 49ers as that backup option in the slot.
Oh, we'll see. It's going to be, like I said, wide receiver is going to be a fun position to kind of keep an eye on. So you're very well right about that. Tay Martin, I think he is an exceptional player who really kind of stepped up last year, and I expect him to take a bigger leap this year. So it's going to be fun, man. Those back end wide receivers that they're developing for the future, they got some good ones, and I'd hate to see them cut a guy that could probably make this roster in the future and then get snagged by a team, but unfortunately, that's the business. I'm sure we're going to lose one or two or three guys here and there that we don't want to lose, but that's also another strategy that we'll have to talk about later down the line when they're trimming rosters of, who can they keep, who are they going to cut, who do they think is going to make the practice squad. It's tough, man. I'm glad I don't have to be in charge of, managing the roster and trying to trim it down to 53. There's a lot of players that should be able to make it, but again, it's got to be the best 53 players that give you the best chance to make it. It's tough, man, and you can't really sit there and sulk over people's feelings. Like, players are gonna get hurt, but it's a business, and you gotta realize that. So it's gonna be fun though. This battle. We got about, I'd say, about 10, 12 minutes left until the hour comes up. I don't know if there's anything else that we didn't cover that you want to go over, Rohan. But I'm also gonna open this up to some questions from the fans out there on the chat. So if you guys have questions, we'll try to get to as many of them in the next 10 minutes or so, and then we'll wrap it up. There is one here I wanted to kind of get to real quick. Sacktown says he loves Mason, Jordan Mason, that is. He says he won't be RB2 unless he learns how to block. Mitchell and TDP are both way better blockers. What say you, running back? I'm all aboard the JP Mason hype train. I think this kid was phenomenal as a rookie, rookie, undrafted, came from nothing, and he cracked the roster last year. We saw some flashes here and there. Used him kind of like a mini Marshawn, and there was times where I was like, man, this guy just looks so good at running. And he was a rookie, and he's still kind of learning how the game works, still learning the system. And I just remember that Seattle game. Boom, he clinched the game, he clinched the division. Like, that big run he had, I wish he would have scored the touchdown. But like, as the season kind of progressed, man, this kid just was running harder and harder and harder. And you can't teach someone about the running.
There we go.
There we go. What do you think about the running back position?
Talking about the running back position here, Jordan Mason, you pointed it out. Mini Marshawn in a way last year, deemed the closer by his teammates for the way that he physically was able to wear down opponents at the end of games last year. I think that he's a guy who definitely could see an uptick in his role. And to me, I think the most important part of that RB2 spot for me is it's an interesting one, but I think it's who can replicate Christian McCaffrey's skill set the most. Why do I say that? Well, the 49ers hit the jackpot when they landed McCaffrey last year, and it's because of the way that his skill set revolves, or his skill set opens up the way the 49ers can attack the opposing defenses on the offensive side of the ball. They can stretch them out because they've got a viable check down option, one that they've searched for a few years and really weren't able to get. Talk about the JaMycal Hasty's of the world and all the different running backs that they've cycled through trying to get a receiving threat out of them. McCaffrey's really the first true receiving threat that they've had in the Kyle Shanahan era that has consistently come to play. I think that they want to replicate whoever. Nobody's going to be McCaffrey, but replicate whoever can best, or play whoever can best replicate that skill set. And so, to me, that's the big question of training camp. I've heard reports that Jordan Mason has improved his receiving ability, and not improved, but also got more of an opportunity to showcase it. I thought it was there as well last year in glimpses, got more of an opportunity to showcase it. So if he can become a better pass catcher on third down situations, if McCaffrey gets cycled out, you have an option where you don't really change much in your arsenal. Despite the way that Mason runs, you don't change too much, and you're able to implement that same package and really create a bigger threat in Jordan Mason. He does have to learn how to block. That is 100% true. And that could very well dictate how his playing time goes, and that could have also been the reason where he doesn't play as much in year one. But because Kyle Shanahan does prioritize those pass blockers as running backs, we'll see if that portion of his game continues to improve. But I'm interested to see how his receiving ability continues to improve as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's the big thing that Shanahan focuses on is right, no block, no rock. He wants these guys to be physical. He wants his teammates, his team basically to be bullies. And that's a reason why he challenges these players, especially at wide receiver position. Right? We've seen it before. Brandon Aiyuk, Dante Pettis, and now Danny Gray. Is he wants them to be physical, and that's your first step. If you can block, he'll give you the opportunities. And you're right. And then it brings us to the next question is, does TDP make the roster? And I think it's the same concept with Jordan Mason. If he can block, he'll get his opportunities. And in those opportunities he gets in training camp and preseason, he has to produce. And that's basically what it is. You have to do what these coaches want. And Kyle Shanahan wants you to be a willing blocker. And then once you get to that point and he gives you his opportunities, you have to make the most of it. If you're fumbling the ball, you can't get the yardage. And that's your opportunity that you get. You may not get a lot. You have to make the most of it. And I think that's why Jordan Mason made the roster last year, is because in his small sample size, he just ran his head off. And he was running like he was on fire. And that's what Shanahan saw. And he's like, I like this guy's hustle, like his heart. Like I said, you can't teach that. You can teach someone how to block, but you can't teach that heart. So we'll see. And I think TDP will make it if he can improve upon last year. And I think with Rohan, what he said is these guys need to be able to pass or catch passes out of the backfield. It's going to dictate every single running back on this team. If your name's not CMC, is can you catch out of the backfield? Because if CMC goes down, somebody's going to have to be able to do that. And you don't want you don't want Debo to just be the guy that has to carry the load again, because if he does, he's going to get hurt again. So you want someone that can help out the whole roster in case CMC has to go down for a few games, which we hope it doesn't happen. But Rohan's exactly right. Is you have to be able to pass catch as running back to take some load off of everybody else on this team. So good questions. Let's see what else we got out here. Let's take a few more questions. Let's see. Drunk Polish says Mason has that dog in him. Arun says, I'm worried about the tackle on the right side of the O-line. Yeah, we talked about that. I think Rohan mentioned that he's really worried about the depth, especially at right tackle. This is a good question from Flood. He says, what's the key to keeping Elijah Mitchell healthy throughout the season? What do you think? Is there a special key?
I think, I don't know. This one's tough, right? Because the big issue with Elijah Mitchell is those knee injuries. And they're unfortunate because you get a helmet pop to the knee. It's one of those knee sprains that, costs you 6 to 8 weeks. And it's tough because do you want him to give up a part of his physicality to preserve that health? Because if he gives up a part of his physicality, he's not Elijah Mitchell. And it's also the unfortunate nature of these injuries. But remember, when these injuries occur, the unfortunate injuries occur more and more. in that same area, it just becomes harder and harder to consistently remain healthy. And so to me, I don't know the answer to that question. And that's the hope the 49ers can keep him healthy. My answer would probably be to, put him in a timeshare, limit his workload, but also allow him to operate freely when he is on the field, things like that. And I think the 49ers are in a position to do that because they've got three strong options that they trust, as well as, all three of them in a way can take the bell cow role if they need to. And so I think they've got flexibility there. But the hope is Elijah Mitchell, hopefully you can remain healthy. Bet is that he won't. Hope is that he is. But the thing is, I don't think the 49ers are as worried about the injury scenario, understanding that they've got still two strong guys they believe in should that situation occur.
Yeah, I think they've safeguarded themselves in the event if Mitchell does get hurt. I mean, I hope he doesn't because he's very talented. We see what he can do. Like him and CMC, if they can be healthy together, man, that's a nasty duo. But kind of going back to what we were saying about Jauan Jennings, Mitchell to me is a guy that if they have to, push comes to shove, and those other guys like Jordan Mason, like we talked about, and TDP, if they really step up, I think they could trade Elijah Mitchell and get some value out of him instead of having to have another unfortunate, injury late in seasons. Because this offense is all about physicality, and like you said, in order for Mitchell to stay healthy, maybe you got to take away some of that physicality. I don't think Shanahan wants to sacrifice what makes this roster what it is the physical running. And if they have to, maybe they do trade him and they get some value out of him. Again, I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think it's something to keep an eye on during the offseason and training camp moving forward. Because, again, he's very talented, but this 49er team is not going to sit around and say, oh, maybe we should cut back on our physicality. No, they want to hit you in the nose. They want to bloody your lip. That's 49ers football, man. So we'll see. I think there could be something happening maybe down the line. If they are going to trade someone, to me, he's a candidate, like we said with Jauan Jennings maybe down the line. But I think Mitchell's a guy that if they had to make a trade, I don't think they'd be opposed to it. But we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's going to be exciting, man.
I agree, definitely.
Yeah, so I think that pretty much wraps us up for tonight. Rohan, anything else you got going tonight, later this week? Let the Niner fans know.
Yeah, man. I mean, obviously, recently streaming has been not as much. Trying to preserve a couple of days a week just so that we can get a better show when we come out with them. So glad I was able to hop on with you today. Had one earlier with Marco. If you guys want some more 49ers content, be sure to go check that out. Link is in my description. You can go search up my name on YouTube. Later this week, got one with John Chapman tomorrow, a fun show that should be a cool one in the afternoon. And then obviously the action really kicks off next week when training camp comes along. Going to be doing what I did last year, having a stream every day that training camp is there, detailing what I saw that day. Sure that Raj will do the same as well when he's out there. So it'll be a great time. Be sure to tune into both of our channels. Be sure to hit the like button on our videos, subscribe, and make sure you stay tuned in with the content.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'll be live next week at training camp just like you. And then I got to work. And then when I come back, eventually in the evening, I will be live streaming and talking about my experience with training camp and give you my intake. So maybe next week we can link up and do some shows together, do a little collab live stream. I'm sure that everybody's going to want to do all the collabs next week. That's when the nitty gritty starts next week. I'm excited. I will see you at training camp, Rohan. And if you guys are going, I will see you, ladies and gentlemen, at training camp. Wear red and say what's up, man. I don't bite. Rohan doesn't bite. Say what's up to us and, take a flick. And, I'm excited to see all the Niner fans. Let's go, man. Enjoy your rest of your week. And tomorrow night, I'll be live with Larry Krueger at 4 p.m. Pacific. I'm going to pick his brain. I'm gonna call him out on the Jauan Jennings thing. That's what we'll do. So y'all have a good rest of your night.
100%.
Yes, sir.